Imagine accusing a federal judge of breaking the law, only to break the law yourself in the process. That's exactly what Attorney General Pam Bondi is being accused of after a dramatic week of political attacks, legal twists, and one move that might just blow up in her face. This is the story of how a high-profile strike on Judge James Boberg turned into a potential self-inflicted disaster, and the irony is almost unbelievable. In a political move that sent shockwaves through legal and political circles, Attorney General Pam Bondi unleashed not one, but two major bombshells in the same week, moves that instantly sparked heated debate across the country. Her first announcement was already controversial. She sent a criminal referral against former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to a grand jury. For many, that alone would have been headline news for days. But Bondi wasn't finished. Just when people thought her week couldn't get any more dramatic, she took things a bold step further, turning her sights on a federal judge. That judge was James Boberg, a figure well known in political and legal circles. Appointed to the bench by former President Barack Obama, Boberg has presided over some of the most high-profile and politically charged cases in recent history. He has handled multiple cases involving Donald Trump, including trials connected to the January 6th Capitol riots. Over the years, Boberg's rulings have often frustrated Trump and his allies, leading some in conservative circles to view him as an adversary. Bondi seized on that history and claimed she was filing a misconduct complaint against Boberg. Her accusation? That he had overstepped his role as a judge, speaking out in a way that, according to her, could influence other members of the judiciary. In Bondi's telling, Boberg had crossed a line by allegedly trying to sway opinions against the Trump administration. But here's where things take a surprising turn, and where Bondi's aggressive move starts to look less like a calculated strike and more like a risky gamble. According to reports, her complaint is on shaky legal ground. The comments she's targeting weren't made at a press conference or in an interview. They were part of a private, closed-door judicial meeting where judges are actually encouraged to share candid thoughts about legal and constitutional matters. Even more explosive is the fact that legal experts are now saying Bondi's own actions could put her in trouble. The way she handled this complaint, publicizing it before privately notifying the judge, may have violated federal judicial rules. In other words, in her attempt to accuse Boberg of misconduct, she might have committed misconduct herself. This isn't just a story about one attorney general going after one judge. It's quickly becoming a cautionary tale about how political attacks can backfire in unexpected and damaging ways. To understand why Pam Bondi's complaint against Judge Boberg is raising so many questions, you first need to know about a long-standing tradition within the U.S. judicial system, one that has been happening quietly for years, far away from cameras, headlines, or political spin. Every year, U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts organizes what's known as a private judicial summit. This is not a flashy public event. There are no television crews, no reporters scribbling notes, no microphones recording every word. It's strictly invitation only, and the attendees are federal judges from across the country. The purpose of this gathering is simple but important. It's a chance for judges to speak freely about the state of the judiciary, the challenges they face, the trends they're noticing in the courts, and their thoughts on how the system is functioning. These meetings are meant to be safe spaces for honest discussion. Judges appointed by presidents from both political parties, Republicans and Democrats, come together without partisan walls. And the topics covered? They're not just political flashpoints. Past discussions have ranged from environmental disputes to consumer protection cases to corporate lawsuits to the day-to-day realities of keeping the courts running fairly and efficiently. These summits are about judicial perspective, not political theater. It was at one of these summits, during the most recent meeting, that Judge James Boberg reportedly made the comments that Bondi is now attacking him for. According to those present, Boberg expressed a concern, not a declaration, not an attack, but a concern. He said he worried that the Trump administration could trigger a constitutional crisis if it chose to ignore federal court rulings. He even noted that in some past instances, including cases he had personally presided over, the administration had already disregarded certain decisions. This was not a speech to the press. It wasn't an op-ed in a newspaper. It wasn't even a public legal opinion. This was a closed-door conversation at a meeting specifically designed for judges to express their professional worries and observations. In other words, Boberg was doing exactly what the summit was created for, sharing candid, thoughtful views with his colleagues in a confidential setting. But somehow this private, routine exchange has now become the basis for one of the most controversial and potentially self-damaging moves of Pam Bondi's career. But to Pam Bondi, Judge Boberg's comments, shared in what was supposed to be a private, professional setting, were enough to launch a full-scale attack. In her view, his remarks crossed a line. She claimed that Boberg's words amounted to an unsolicited attempt to influence Chief Justice John Roberts and other federal judges against Donald Trump. On paper, that might sound like a serious accusation, but here's where the logic behind Bondi's complaint starts to unravel. First, the meeting in question wasn't some random hallway conversation or a sneaky whisper campaign. It was a judicial summit specifically designed for judges to share their thoughts, opinions, and concerns about the state of the courts. In fact, that's the entire point of the event. It's a safe space for open dialogue, one where honesty is encouraged, not punished. Second, Bondi framed Boberg's comments as unsolicited, as though he barged into the discussion uninvited to push a personal agenda. But accounts from people familiar with the meeting say otherwise. Boberg was asked for his opinion. In other words, his remarks were a direct response to a request for input, not an off-topic political rant. Third, judges, whether appointed by Democrats or Republicans, have been engaging in this kind of candid exchange at these summits for decades without any trouble. They've discussed controversial topics, expressed concerns about administrations from both parties, and even critiqued government policies. It's not unusual. It's expected. And here's the kicker. If Bondi's standard for misconduct were applied consistently, every single judge who has ever attended one of these summits could potentially face a complaint. That would even include Chief Justice John Roberts himself, who not only participates in these conversations, but also hosts them. Yet Bondi didn't go after all judges.
She didn't file a sweeping complaint against dozens of federal jurists or target Roberts for the same behavior. Instead, she singled out Boberg, a judge with a long history of rulings that have frustrated Donald Trump and his allies. That's why critics are calling this not just political, but selective prosecution, or in this case, selective complaining. By going after Boberg alone, Bondi's move looks less like a principled stand for judicial ethics and more like a personal or partisan attack dressed up as a misconduct claim. And here's where things really start to blow back on Pam Bondi. What began as an aggressive strike against Judge Boberg might now be turning into a legal boomerang headed straight for Bondi herself. According to multiple legal experts, the way she handled this misconduct complaint could actually put her on the wrong side of federal law. Here's why. Under established judicial rules, when someone files a misconduct complaint against a federal judge, there is a very specific process that must be followed. The first step is private notification. The complaint must be delivered directly to the judge in question before it is made public in any way. This rule exists to protect the integrity of the process, to prevent public shaming before facts are reviewed, and to ensure fairness for both sides. But Bondi didn't follow that process at all. Instead of quietly notifying Judge Boberg first, she went straight for the spotlight. She skipped the private step entirely and announced her complaint on Twitter for the entire world to see. Within minutes, the story was flying across social media and being picked up by news outlets.
That's not just breaking with tradition. It's potentially breaking the law. Legal scholars warn that this could violate federal regulations governing judicial misconduct filings. At the very least, it undermines the confidentiality that the process is built on. At worst, it could be considered a breach serious enough to warrant its own investigation. And here's the irony that critics can't stop talking about. In her attempt to accuse Boberg of misconduct, Bondi may have committed misconduct herself. She claimed to be defending the law while possibly violating it. She accused someone else of stepping over the ethical line while leaving very visible footprints on it herself. It's the kind of political cell phone that commentators are calling political theater gone wrong. Instead of looking like a strong defender of judicial integrity, Bondi now risks looking like a reckless official who put politics above procedure. An attorney general accusing a judge of breaking the law? By breaking the law herself. If it weren't so serious, some say it would almost be comedic. For Judge Boberg, the answer is probably nothing. Legal analysts widely agree that Bondi's complaint is built on flimsy grounds and is unlikely to survive the review process. The Judicial Summit comments she targeted don't appear to break any rules, and even if they were controversial, they happened in a private forum designed exactly for that kind of discussion. Bondi also hinted at the possibility of impeachment, removing Boberg from his position altogether. But that's little more than political posturing. Impeaching a federal judge requires a majority in the House of Representatives and a 2/3 vote in the Senate. Republicans simply don't have the numbers in Congress right now to make that happen, especially over something as thin as a comment in a closed-door meeting. As for Pam Bondi herself, the chances of real consequences are also slim. Yes, legal experts say she may have broken federal rules by p.